realize it's the same situation on that side. You don't know who this person is that you're inviting in. And because I experienced it on both ends.
After they are done with Diddy, Jay-Z is up next to be exposed, right?
All right, buckle up, because this story is about to take you down a rabbit hole you won't believe. Imagine two of the most iconic names in the music industry, Prince and Diddy, linked together, not just through fame and fortune, but through a web of rumors, controversies, and alleged behind-the-scenes drama that could rival any Hollywood script. What if we told you that Prince, the man who spent his entire career fighting for artistic freedom and ownership, might have crossed paths with Diddy, a music mogul whose career has often been clouded by whispers of exploitation? How does the story of a creative genius who waged war against the music industry for decades intersect with the lavish, controversial world of Diddy's infamous gatherings? Let's dive in.
I met Prince when I was 12.
Where did you meet Prince when you were 12?
In Dayton. After
Really?
he performed at UD Arena. Yeah, I mean, I knew him my whole life. He was like the guiding force for me. It's the reason I had high self-esteem was because of him. Like, just a lot of things that I didn't...
Did he say something, or was his behavior inspiring and self-esteem shedding?
First, let's set the stage with Prince, the legendary artist who practically redefined what it meant to be a musician. From the moment he stepped into the spotlight, Prince wasn't just another star, he was a revolutionary. A man who believed that the art he created belonged solely to him, not the corporations that profited off it. That belief, that passion, would lead to one of the most famous showdowns in music history, Prince versus Warner Brothers. But here's where things take an interesting turn. While Prince was busy fighting for his rights, he allegedly crossed paths with Diddy, whose reputation for hosting wild gatherings and making questionable business moves was already well known. And it's here that the story starts to unravel.
He was a high thinker and a guy that was always 30 steps ahead of whatever the curve was. And you know, when you play 26, 28 instruments, it means that you are able to be multifaceted while also focusing on each thing like it's the only thing, which is a...
Now, Prince lending his home for a Diddy-hosted gathering might seem innocent at first glance, but those who knew Prince would say otherwise. Prince was known for being extremely private and particular about the energy he allowed into his space. So why would he let Diddy, of all people, host an event at his house? According to whispers, Prince never actually attended these gatherings himself, and there's a reason for that. Allegedly, Prince had his suspicions about what was really happening behind closed doors. If you've ever heard the stories about Diddy's late-night events, you know they're the stuff of legend, or maybe infamy. The rules were strict: no personal security allowed, no phones, and absolutely no leaks. What went on inside was anybody's guess, but Prince apparently wanted no part of it, and yet he still lent out his space. Was it a gesture of goodwill, or was there more to the story?
But he let me know that you could be short and light-skinned with long hair, and people could make fun of you, but as long as women loved you, you had nothing to fear.
Think about it. Prince, the man who famously scrawled slave across his face to protest his lack of control over his own music, letting Diddy, a figure often associated with corporate-style deals and questionable practices, host an event at his home? It's almost too strange to believe. But then again, Prince was no stranger to contradictions. He was an artist who could both embrace and reject the very industry that made him a star. Maybe he saw something in Diddy, something that reminded him of himself before the battle scars from his fights with Warner Brothers started to show.
Prince. You met Prince.
Prince was a friend of mine. He was a friend of mine.
What was those conversations? Because look, I mean, sometimes we don't really understand or appreciate someone until they're gone. I did. I was a big Prince fan, all of his stuff,
Yeah.
because he could play all the instruments, he could sing, he could dance. He was an entertainer that could sing.
Speaking of Warner Brothers, this is where things get even more tangled. Prince's feud with the label wasn't just about music. It was about principle. He believed that the art he created was an extension of his soul, and to have that taken away from him was, in his eyes, a form of oppression. It's why he went to such lengths to regain control, even changing his name to an unpronounceable symbol to break free from the bondage of his contract. But despite his efforts, Warner Brothers held on tight, frustrating Prince at every turn. And guess who else had dealings with Warner? You guessed it, Diddy.
Yeah, he was like unlike anybody in the world. He was just an amazing individual.
Diddy's relationship with Warner wasn't about fighting the system. It was about leveraging it. When Diddy struck a deal with Warner for his label, many saw it as a savvy business move. But others couldn't help but notice the stark contrast between Diddy's approach and Prince's. While Prince was busy trying to dismantle the system, Diddy seemed to be thriving within it. And for someone like Prince, who viewed the music industry as a battlefield, this difference in approach might have been hard to ignore. But here's where things get even murkier. Around the same time Prince was waging his war against Warner, he was also trying to navigate the rapidly changing landscape of music distribution. Enter Jay-Z, another major player in this tangled web. Prince had reportedly placed some trust in Jay-Z's streaming platform to help distribute his music. After all, Jay-Z had built a reputation as someone who cared about artists' rights, or so it seemed. But not long after Prince's passing, his estate would file a lawsuit against Jay-Z's platform, accusing it of distributing Prince's music without proper authorization. The allegations? That Jay-Z's team had fabricated documents to justify streaming Prince's work. If true, this would have been a massive betrayal, especially for someone as fiercely protective of his art as Prince.
About the business, as far as being a black man that was rich in this business at 18 years old, had already did his first $1 million contract, had already broken records, was determined that he didn't want to be like anybody else, was so great of a guitar player that black people just stopped caring about guitar, and he got left out on a limb and somehow still had to create his way out of that.
Now, think about this for a second. You've got Prince, a man who spent his life fighting for creative control, allegedly betrayed by a platform he trusted. And then there's Diddy, linked to Warner, a company Prince fought against for decades. It's almost as if Prince was surrounded by figures who represented everything he stood against. Could this have been part of a larger problem, one that Prince saw coming long before it fully unfolded? What's even more chilling is that Prince seemed to know that his time was running out. Days before his passing, he reportedly told those around him, "Wait a few days before you waste any prayers." It's a haunting statement, one that has fueled countless theories about whether Prince knew he was in danger. And when you consider the issues he was fighting, issues that put him at odds with some of the most powerful players in the industry, it's hard not to wonder if there was more going on than meets the eye.
I have to still say allegedly, has done things and allegedly participated in a lot of things that the public would not be happy to know.
But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Before we dive deeper into Prince's mysterious final days, let's circle back to Diddy for a moment. By now, you're probably wondering how all of this connects. Why would Prince, a man who fought so hard for his independence, even entertain the idea of working with or being associated with figures like Diddy or Jay-Z, whose actions seemed to contradict everything Prince stood for? Was it a case of keeping your enemies close, or was there something else at play? Perhaps Prince saw potential in them, a chance to influence the next generation of artists to fight for their rights. Or maybe he was simply trying to survive in an industry that, by all accounts, can be unforgiving to those who don't play by its rules. One thing's for sure, Prince wasn't naive. He knew exactly what he was up against, and he wasn't afraid to call it out. In interviews, award show speeches, and even his music made it clear that he saw the music industry for what it was, a machine designed to exploit creativity for profit. And yet, despite all his warnings, it seems that the same issues he fought against are still alive and well today. Could that be why his name continues to come up in discussions about figures like Diddy and Jay-Z? Because even in demise, Prince's fight remains relevant?
If that's part of the indictment, that's somewhat like a blackmail. He was blackmailing people to be in the freak-offs. So that's federal. That could be that's a federal charge. He can't blackmail people to say, yo, listen here, you did it once and you're gonna do it again. That ain't gonna make it with the government or nobody.
And that's just the beginning. We haven't even touched on the broader implications of Prince's battles or the eerie similarities between his story and the struggles faced by other artists. But for now, let's leave it here. Think about everything we've just unpacked, the connections, the contradictions, the controversies. What do you think Prince would say if he were here today, watching the industry continue to wrestle with the very issues he spent his life trying to fix? And more importantly, what does it say about the industry that someone like Prince, with all his talent and influence, still had to fight so hard just to own his work? Stay tuned, because this story is far from over.
As far as, is he gonna turn people in? Is he gonna cooperate? If the federal government wants him to cooperate, and they're gonna cut his time, because right now he's looking at 15 to life. With all the charges he had to. He won't get out till 70 years old. He about 70. That's when they start talking about letting him come to a halfway house.
Now let's pick up where we left off. We've already painted a vivid picture of Prince's unrelenting fight against the music industry and his connections to some of its most controversial players like Diddy and Jay-Z. But now we dive even deeper into the tangled web of legal battles, personal betrayals, and shocking revelations that have left fans questioning everything they thought they knew about the music world. Prince's story isn't just about one man's fight for his art. It's a cautionary tale for every artist who dares to challenge the system. And trust us, things are about to get even messier.
Responsibility for what he did as an individual. Sean is the one who pulled that gun out. Sean is the one who shot. So he has to take responsibility for that. He put that gun back in his...
Let's talk about Prince's career during the height of his battle with Warner Brothers. By the mid-90s, Prince had become a household name, but fame didn't shield him from the frustrations of being tied to a system that seemed determined to control him. Remember how he changed his name to an unpronounceable symbol that wasn't just a publicity stunt, it was a protest. Prince was sending a loud and clear message to Warner Brothers: you might own my name, but you'll never own me. And this wasn't just about creative control, it was about the principle of ownership. Prince believed that every artist should have the right to control their work, their image, and their legacy. He wanted to rewrite the rules of the industry. But the powers that be weren't having it.
Jay-Z got his whooped by his sister-in-law on camera. What's her name? Solange. You got it after. The feds ain't step in and do nothing. The feds don't care about you getting your whooped.
As Prince waged his war against Warner, another figure in the music world was quietly building an empire: Jay-Z. At first glance, Jay-Z seemed like the kind of artist Prince might have admired. Here was a man who came from nothing, worked his way to the top, and built a business empire that extended far beyond music. But as we've seen time and time again, success in the music industry often comes at a cost. And for Jay-Z, that cost may have included stepping on a few toes, or in this case, crossing paths with Prince in ways that would later spark controversy. Fast forward to 2015, when Prince teamed up with Jay-Z's streaming platform Tidal to release his album Hit and Run. On the surface, it seemed like a perfect partnership. After all, Tidal was marketed as a platform that prioritized artists' rights, a concept that aligned perfectly with Prince's values. But behind the scenes, things weren't as rosy as they appeared. Shortly after Prince's untimely passing, his estate filed a lawsuit against Tidal, accusing the platform of streaming 15 of Prince's albums without proper authorization. According to the lawsuit, Tidal had only been granted a limited license to stream Hit and Run for a specific period of time. So how did those other albums end up on the platform? That's the million-dollar question.
They don't want, if they was in any of those freak-off tapes, if they played a part in any of those Diddy sessions, they don't want it to get out to the general public to make up their brand. That's why a lot of those rappers...
The estate's lawyers claimed that Tidal fabricated documents to make it look like they had the rights to stream Prince's older work. In other words, they accused Jay-Z's platform of playing dirty. And here's where things get even sketchier. Tidal reportedly refused to hand over key documents that could have clarified the situation. Instead, they hid behind legal loopholes, citing something called the common interest doctrine to avoid sharing potentially incriminating evidence. If true, this would have been a huge betrayal not just to Prince, but to every artist who believed in Tidal's mission. But let's not forget, Prince wasn't the only artist who had issues with how his work was handled after his passing. This is an industry where exploitation runs rampant, and for every artist like Prince who speaks out, there are countless others who suffer in silence. And if you think this was just about legal rights and contracts, think again. Many fans believe that Prince's fight for independence and his willingness to call out the industry's shady practices put a target on his back. After all, the music world has a long history of silencing those who dare to challenge the status quo.
What his team is trying to do is get the public to assume that the government is leaking some of this negative information about him, like that Cassie video. But the reality is, he's got a lot of enemies.
Now, let's shift gears and talk about Diddy. While Prince was busy battling Warner Brothers and later dealing with the fallout from his partnership with Tidal, Diddy was carving out his own legacy in the music world. But unlike Prince, whose mission was to empower artists, Diddy's career has been clouded by accusations of exploitation. From former bad boy artists who claim they were mistreated to rumors about his infamous gatherings, Diddy's reputation has always been a mixed bag. And when you consider his connection to Warner, the same company that Prince fought so hard against, it's hard not to wonder if there's a deeper connection between these two stories.
At the end of the day, just to tell the truth, so hopefully we can get down to the bottom of this. I'm 100%, the charges against me are 100% false, and hopefully due to time, we'll start to see that.
One of the most intriguing aspects of this entire saga is the stark contrast between Prince and Diddy's approaches to the music industry. Prince believed in fighting the system from the outside, using his platform to expose its flaws and demand change. Diddy, on the other hand, seemed to thrive within the system, using it to build his empire, while others accused him of leaving a trail of broken promises in his wake. And yet, despite their differences, these two men shared a common thread. They were both incredibly powerful figures in an industry that often chews people up and spits them out. Did they see each other as allies, rivals, or something in between? That's a question we may never fully answer.
In her civil lawsuit, Cassie said that she was the victim of abuse, assault, and at the hands of Diddy.
What we do know is that Prince wasn't afraid to call out the industry's hypocrisy. In one particularly memorable moment, he stood on stage at an awards show and delivered a scathing critique of how artists are treated. As long as you sign to a contract, you're going to take a minority share of the winnings, he said. A select few of us will do well, the majority will not. It was a bold statement, one that resonated with fans and artists alike. But for those in positions of power, it was a direct threat. Prince wasn't just speaking out for himself. He was speaking out for every artist who'd ever been exploited, overlooked, or undervalued. And let's not forget, Prince's fight for independence wasn't limited to his music. In the early 2000s, he went after online platforms like YouTube and eBay for unauthorized use of his work. He was one of the first major artists to recognize the potential and the pitfalls of the digital age. While others were content to let their work be used without permission, Prince took a stand, even if it meant going up against some of the biggest names in tech. It was a move that earned him both praise and criticism, but for Prince, it was never about being popular. It was about doing what was right.
Not do this alone. Do you foresee that there could be other charges related to this case?
I'm not taking anything off the table.
No one wants him mentioned.
Meanwhile, Diddy was making headlines for very different reasons. His lavish lifestyle, high-profile relationships, and controversial business practices kept him in the public eye, but not always for the right reasons. And while Prince was fighting to protect his art, Diddy was being accused of exploiting others. It's a stark contrast, and one that raises some uncomfortable questions about what it takes to succeed in the music world. Is it possible to build an empire without stepping on others? Or is the system so broken that even the most well-intentioned artists end up compromising their values?
Now, to the latest on the arrest of Sean Diddy Combs. This one has so many people talking. The disgraced music mogul facing federal racketeering, conspiracy, and trafficking charges. Both the prosecution and defense teams are set to discuss the next phase of action following the indictment as investigators work to determine potential co-conspirators. But how exactly did we get here?
As we dig deeper into this story, one thing becomes clear. The music industry is a battleground, and not everyone makes it out unscathed. For Prince, the fight for independence was a lifelong mission, one that defined his career and cemented his legacy as a trailblazer. For Diddy, the path to success was paved with both triumphs and controversies, leaving fans and critics alike to wonder where his true loyalties lie. And for Jay-Z, the question remains, was he a champion for artists' rights or just another player in a game that's rigged from the start? But here's the thing, this isn't just about Prince, Diddy, or Jay-Z, it's about the bigger picture. It's about an industry that has spent decades profiting off the creativity of others while offering little in return. It's about the artists who dared to speak out and the ones who stayed silent. And it's about the fans, who often don't realize the price their favorite musicians pay to bring their art to the world. So as we continue to unravel this story, let's not lose sight of what's really at stake. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just a story about music. It's a story about power, control, and the length some people will go to protect it.
This is very significant, just from who we associate Diddy being and everything we've seen him do over the decades. Like you said, this is quite the downfall to go from, we saw the mansions back in March that were raided by the feds. So to go from living in those mansions to being in a jail cell right now, I think it really underscores the magnitude of what he's facing and the weight of the federal government.
And with that, we're just scratching the surface. There's still so much more to uncover, from Prince's mysterious final days to the ongoing battles over his legacy. But for now, let's leave it here. What do you make of the connections between Prince, Diddy, and Jay-Z? Were they allies, enemies, or something else entirely? And what does it say about the music industry that these stories keep coming up, long after the artists themselves have moved on? Let us know your thoughts and stay tuned. The story is far from over.